West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
And we begin tonight with an unprecedented and frankly shameful day in American politics. The Tennessee House took up resolutions to expel 3 Democratic lawmakers, not for breaking any laws, mind you. They moved to expel these members for standing in the well of the chamber despite being ruled out of order by the Speaker and attempting to speak loudly against gun violence and against children being shot dead in schools, something that literally just happened weeks ago in Nashville. These 3 members were standing in alliance with gun reform supporters, including hundreds of students who packed the gallery, hoping and praying that the legislature would take up a gun reform plan. Instead, this was the plan: to expel the members who stood up for gun reform. One state representative, Justin Jones, was expelled this afternoon, while late today, State Representative Gloria Johnson survived expulsion by 1 vote. A 3rd lawmaker, Justin Pearson, still faces a vote at this hour. Republicans likened the actions of these 3 lawmakers to the January 6th insurrectionists. Here are the 3 Democrats arriving at the Tennessee Capitol this morning. They are now referred to as the Tennessee Three. Their call for gun safety legislation comes in the wake of that school shooting in Nashville, when 3 children and 3 caregivers were gunned down at their school minutes from the state capitol. Chants from protesters were audible throughout the session today, both inside and outside the chamber, by young people, some of whom can't even vote yet, but who are demanding action on the astronomical increase in gun violence at schools. Hundreds of advocates, students, young people, and parents gathered this morning, as they have been every day since the shooting, in what is literally a fight for their lives. Staging walkouts, marching to the Capitol, flooding the State House to channel their terror into action. A burden this country continuously places on these very young shoulders, while Republicans focus instead on the extremely rare, extraordinary, and anti-democratic action to silence their opponents. One of the Tennessee Three, Gloria Johnson, a former school teacher, took to the floor ahead of the expulsion vote that she barely survived.
Respect the human dignity of every citizen in the state of Tennessee, and not just the ones that look like you, and not just the ones that agree with you. We've done so much damage up here to vulnerable communities this year, and now we're doing damage by not addressing the concerns of the families and the children.
But it was Justin Jones, who represents the district in Nashville where last month's shooting took place, who was ultimately expelled. And here is what he had to say moments before the vote.
We shall not bow. That is what I say to the House Speaker, that we shall not bow Because what is disorderly is a body that has used voter suppression and rigged maps to take control of our state. What is disorderly is a body that silenced the voices of Nashville at the congressional level, at the city council level, now trying to remove us at the legislative level. That is disorderly to democracy. That is disruptive to what we have an obligation to uphold.
And joining me now is State Representative Justin Jones of Nashville. And Representative Jones, I watched this. I spent the day watching what was happening with this hearing and watching you. And you were extraordinary, by the way. But what I found really remarkable was how small and mundane the arguments were to expel you. You were talking about the idea that you weren't there to make friends or to bow down to your colleagues on the other side. And they were talking about decorum and the rules of order. I want to show an image of what happened on the day in question. This was what, if we could put it up, this is what was happening on the floor when the three of you went to the well of the chamber. And I think it's important for you to explain what happened and why you all went to the floor.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Ms. Reed. We went to the floor because multiple times we were silenced from talking about the crisis of gun violence that the thousands of young people out here were demanding that we act on. I'm the youngest black lawmaker, formerly was the youngest black lawmaker in the state of Tennessee. I represent one of the most diverse districts. And so I went to the well to speak for my constituents, particularly those young people whose voices were not being heard by this body, that is so beholden to the NRA that they will not listen to these young people who are saying that our lives, we want to feel safe in school. We want to ban assault weapons. And rather than ban assault weapons, these Republican lawmakers in Tennessee are assaulting democracy.
And just to be clear, today, Gloria Johnson, who did end up surviving the expulsion attempt, she made the point, and you made the point as well, that today what we all watched, I watched it online, and those who were able to see it on air, what we saw, she said, and I think you indicated, was not the way that House chamber normally operates. That everyone getting to speak, everyone getting 5 minutes, everyone getting a chance to say their piece. Can you explain, is that the way it normally goes under this speaker and in that house?
I mean, the world was watching Tennessee, which is why they were on their best behavior. But even under their best behavior, you saw the disdain, the arrogance, basically I had a member on the floor call me an uppity Negro. I mean, this is the behavior of our body. And so even with the nation watching them, even with the world watching them, you see the assault on democracy that happened. And the most extreme example was my expulsion, because what it's doing, it's not about me, but it's about the 78,000 people I represent. These young people, one of the most diverse districts being silenced because they're upset that we don't fall in line to their narrative of what Tennessee should be. That is a multiracial democracy. Indeed,
some of the most extraordinary moments. You had one member, the only non-white member in the House majority, lecturing you, he's Indian American, to say you should be happy to be there and you should just join with us and essentially behave yourself. There were, as another member that you alleged, it said to you that you are a disgrace and essentially called you uppity, but then wouldn't do it when you put your phone up and said, say that again on camera. And I believe he might have been one of the sponsors of this resolution. What's the atmosphere like being a 27-year-old, both you, the two Justins are both 27, being a young black legislator in that body? What is it normally like for you all?
I mean, this is a very hostile environment, but more importantly, it's hostile to democracy. And so what you see in there, they're saying you should feel grateful to be here. But they didn't put me here. The people of my district put me here. And that's what they were trying to undo. And from the time I walked in January, I was made to feel like I should not be welcome here because I led protests here. I was arrested in this building over 14 times trying to remove a KKK statue that we finally removed from this rotunda where we're standing. And so my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, from the day I walked in, did not want me here. And today, they overturned democracy. They set a very dangerous precedent for the nation of expelling a duly elected lawmaker because of First Amendment activity. This has never happened in Tennessee history. It's never happened, in any of the examples of expulsions that I gave my colleagues on the floor, which included unethical and criminal behavior, there's only been 3 expulsions from the House in Tennessee history in our over 200 years. And so today they set a precedent that, being the first lawmaker, the first young black lawmaker expelled for speaking for my constituents and doing my job as a representative.
I don't know if we have your piece, but I'll probably play it later. But you talked about, someone has peed in the seat of another member and not been expelled. There have been people accused of sexual assault, serial sexual assault in that chamber, crimes, and it seems that the one thing that this legislature cannot stand, it cannot stomach, are young black lawmakers who speak for their constituents. Can you talk about the protesters? You were speaking for them, and there were a lot of protesters outside on the day in question, the day that you went down with that bullhorn and were trying to have your say, because as you said, you couldn't. What did those young protesters want? What were they saying? What were they chanting? What did they want you to do?
There were thousands of young people. These are the largest protests that we've seen in Nashville in over a decade. And it is so shameful. It's morally insane that a week after a mass shooting impacted my community, I represent a part of Nashville. Here in Nashville, we had a mass shooting at Covenant Elementary, and my colleague's first response is not to pass common sense gun laws, but to expel lawmakers for standing with our constituents, to expel me for being a voice for my district, and particularly these young people who are gathered here begging us act. Many of those young people can't even vote yet, but they will vote one day. But no matter if they can vote or not right now, because they're young, they have a right to be heard, and more importantly, they have a right to feel safe in their schools, free from the terror of mass shootings and this proliferation of weapons of war on our streets in Tennessee.
President Biden has responded to what happened. I don't think I have it in front of me, but what would you like to see at a national level? I think that the country, those who care about, there it is, these kids and these officials gunned down in yet another mass shooting. And what do the GOP officials focus on? Punishing lawmakers who joined thousands of peaceful protesters calling for action. This is a state issue. They can make their own rules in the state house. But at a national level, what would you want to see the response being? And what are your constituents, the people who elected you, what do you think that they would like to see?
This is a very dangerous precedent for the nation, and so we hope that the nation will continue to see what's going on here and support what's happening in Tennessee, because if you didn't tell me this was happening to me, I would think it was 1963 instead of 2023, because what we're seeing is a predominantly white supermajority undoing democracy, forcing their will on my district, which is a predominantly black and brown district, one of the most diverse in Tennessee. And so we see a direct assault on democracy, on our right to free expression, on our right to representation. And so we hope that, the nation will come. The Department of Justice may need to look at this. I know I've been speaking to counsel, and we're going to look at, what are our next steps legally, because I do believe that's unconstitutional. I do believe it's a violation of the rights of not just me, but of my constituents, of the people I represented. And that's the most important thing, is that I did not go to that well in my individual capacity. I went there as a representative of 78,000 Tennesseans whose voices are now silenced because they expelled me and left that seat without a representative.
It is Friday, the 7th of April of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the Diner of Life. Okay, well, it's Friday, Good Friday for those of you who do that, and Easter is on Sunday, of course, and we are in the throes of Passover as we speak. Yes, it's quite the holiday season. And I guess we also had a very historic day yesterday. 2 young black legislators were duly kicked out of the Tennessee State House because they dared speak up to be the voice of young kids who, can't vote. But they don't want to be killed at school. And the reason they're being killed at school is that anybody and their crazy uncle can get a gun. Everybody. So for that transgression, they were kicked to the curb. And so word is, though, the county chairs will then just appoint them to sit in their old seats and then have a special election, which they'll probably win as well, since the districts that they come from voted them in with an overwhelming majority in both districts. This is their first term, by the way. They're really only weeks into being legislators, and the good old boys of the Tennessee House, or Assembly, I believe is how they call themselves, are going to teach these boys, because they're nothing but boys. They're 27 years old, but they're boys. I'm going to teach them boys a lesson. All right. On the same day that we find out that Clarence Thomas has been taking quite a few expensive trips and gifts for decades and decades and decades. And I just got to say, compare that with what happened in Tennessee. What happened in Tennessee was a real high-tech lynching, if you get my drift. And that's what they did. They threw a rope over a tree and they lynched those two young black legislators for the world to see. And they don't care. They think it's a good look. I also like how it is known as the Tennessee Three, by the way. But the 60-year-old white lady school teacher who did the exact same thing as the two young black guys did. She was able to retain her seat by one vote. And why is that? Because Justin Pearson, who had not been voted out yet, voted for her to stay. She won by one vote. But that was set up on purpose because the good old boys of the Tennessee Assembly pretty much want to tell the world, look, this is where the KKK originated. Do you think we're going to just allow these two guys? One of them reminds us of Stokely Carmichael or Medgar Evers. I think Stokely was a bit more inflammatory, and that's why they, that's what they saw. They saw the angry young black guy, the black nationalist. I don't know. They set up this whole scenario, and then they get all peeved. And I love the idea of decorum, too, as an excuse. Decorum is always used as an excuse to keep marginalized groups in their place. Because if you think about decorum, do you think about the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Burberts as having an iota of decorum? I mean, please. Notice they weren't kicked to the curb and expelled. Maybe we ought to start doing that. Maybe. I wish we would, but it's not going to happen because we actually believe in democracy. Now, the Tennessee speaker said that by dint of the fact that this is what cracks me up. The Speaker of the House is claiming that the Tennessee Three brought those kids there to heckle the session, when it was really the kids showed up. They were fed up with all these murders in their schools. 3 9-year-olds slaughtered. Along with, the principal or head of the school, the janitor, and a substitute teacher. Slaughtered. Just up the road. And when I say just up the road, I'm talking like blocks. And what's the first thing that comes out of a repug's mouth? Because they're bought off by the NRA, and we found out what their mindset was during Sandy Hook. Because the NRA and their minions and the GOP went into a confab to figure out what the hell to do about Sandy Hook. And what'd they come up with? Color the survivors and the victims' families as un-American. Too emotional. Extremists. Why? Well, their family member was murdered. Everybody's going to be going a little over the top during that time. It's almost like excited delirium. Almost. Decorum. So those thousands of kids who marched on the Tennessee State House were called terrorists and insurrectionists. Can you believe that? Merely because they were chanting. You know, you ban books, you ban drag, but kids are still in body bags. Decorum. That was so lacking of decorum. But it didn't seem to stop the good old boys in the Tennessee Assembly. One assembly member, man by the name of Farmer, had a few words to say to the uppity black guys. Yep, juvenile. He called their actions juvenile because kids don't want to be murdered in schools anymore, while these effers have been on the take with the NRA for how many decades? Now, let's not forget, the NRA was red sparrowed by Maria Butina, who then laundered Russian rubles through the NRA that got handed out to every single GOP member in Congress, in the Senate, and across the country. You're going to do the bidding of your master, aren't you? And they are. And that's why Justin Pearson and Justin Jones were expelled from the Tennessee legislature. It's not a 2-for-1. It's like a 3 or 4-for-1, actually. All right. We do have a bit of a curated show for you today, and we might as well get right on into it and give you a rundown on what we have in store as we begin here on this fabulous Blue Moon Spirits Friday at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A federal regulatory group voted to officially close the king salmon fishing season along much of the West Coast. That's because of a massive decrease of numbers of king salmon making it upstream. The three Alaska Native tribes have sued to block a major gold mine project. And Vice President Harris promoted a huge community solar deal in Georgia. I expect the Georgia repugs to fight that. They don't like the sun. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where intense fighting in Myanmar sent thousands fleeing to Thailand. And Greece will send more arms to Ukraine, but sets some limits. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page from that chat room link to the left and just down a skosh near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. It really does help us pay our bills and all the other costs that are incurred from running this powerhouse of resistance. If you could afford an espresso type coffee drink, for instance, and send those funds to us once a month, it really does help. So thank you for your generosity to those who have done so and done so recently. Thank you very much. And also thank you to those of you who will consider doing so in the future. if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do that by going to @Netroots Radio on those appointed platforms. And Tom takes care of them, and we thank Tom for doing that too. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable @Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime, and then I also get a diary up when the podcast is available, and I post the show notes and links for that. So you can go to @Justice Putnam on those social media platforms and find the show notes and links to those show notes and links, because that's where the real reportage is. You can follow the show on Twitter @Cookbook West, and please do pick up those podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. They're everywhere. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we begin this fine Blue Moon Spirits Fridays is out of the Associated Press by Julie Watson and Lisa Bowman. A federal regulatory group voted yesterday, Thursday, to officially close king salmon fishing season along much of the West Coast after near record low numbers of fish, also known as Chinook, returned to California's rivers last year. The Pacific Fishery Management Council approved the closure of the 2023 season for all commercial and most recreational Chinook fishing along the coast from Cape Falcon in northern Oregon to the California-Mexico border. Limited recreational salmon fishing will be allowed off southern Oregon in the fall. That's due west of us. The forecasts for Chinook returning to California rivers this year are near record lows, Council Chair Mark Gorlinick said after the vote in a news release. The poor conditions in the freshwater environment that contributed to these low forecasted returns are unfortunately not something that the Council can or has authority to control. Biologists say the Chinook salmon population has declined dramatically after years of drought. Many in the fishing industry say Trump-era rules that allowed more water to be diverted from the Sacramento River Basin to agriculture caused even more harm. The closure applies to adult fall-run Chinook and deals a blow to the Pacific Northwest salmon fishing industry. Much of the salmon caught off Oregon originate in California's Klamath and Sacramento rivers. After hatching in freshwater, they spend 3 years on average maturing in the Pacific, where many are snagged by commercial fishermen, before migrating back to their spawning grounds, where conditions are more ideal to give birth, and then after laying eggs, they die. The Council is an advisory group to the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, which makes the final decision, but historically has followed the Council's rulings. The Secretary's decision will be posted in the Federal Register within days. Experts fear native California salmon are in a spiral toward extinction. Already, California's spring-run Chinook are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, while winter-run Chinook are endangered along with the Central California Coast coho salmon, which has been off-limits to California commercial fishers since the 1990s. Recreational fishing is expected to be allowed only for coho salmon during the summer and for Chinook after September 1st. Salmon season is expected to open as usual north of Cape Falcon, including in the Columbia River and off Washington's coast. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. 3 Alaska Native tribes have sued to block what they say would be one of the largest gold mines in the world, arguing that federal agencies failed to properly analyze health and environmental concerns for the project in southwest Alaska. Tribes from the communities of the Kwethluk, Tuluksak, and Bethel filed a federal lawsuit on Wednesday challenging the adequacy of a 2018 environmental review by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and issuances of a key permit and lease by federal agencies for the Donlin Gold Project. The lawsuit, filed on behalf of the tribes by environmental nonprofit Earth Justice, claims the agencies failed to fully analyze potential harms and health impacts from a catastrophic spill, and did not provide adequate protection for rainbow smelt, a subsistence food, from increased barge traffic related to the project. The lawsuit states the project has received the approvals needed for construction to begin, but that construction has not yet started. The project is about 10 miles north of the Kuskokwim River community of Crooked Creek. Donlin Gold LLC, owned by subsidiaries of Canada-based Nova Gold Resources and Barrick Gold Corp., manages the project. Donlin Gold said in a statement that the federal permitting process was rigorous. Donlin Gold stakeholders fully believe that this lawsuit is meritless and are confident the actual record will once again fully support the agency's decision, the statement said. In the meantime, the Donlin Gold team and the owners continue to advance remaining state permitting as well as drilling and technical work subject to Donlin Gold LLC board approval. The lawsuit names as defendants the Corps, U.S. Interior Department, U.S. Bureau of Land Management, and agency officials. An Interior Department spokesperson declined to comment. Spokesperson with the Corps of Engineers in Alaska referred an email request for comment to the U.S. Department of Justice. The Justice Department is aware of the complaint, but declined further comment. The deposit contains 39 million ounces of gold, worth close to $80 billion at today's prices. A 315-mile natural gas pipeline from the west side of Cook Inlet would supply a power plant at the mine. The project life is anticipated around 3 decades. The mine is expected to employ 3,000 people during construction and about 1,400 people during operations. Opposition has grown in recent years from tribes and other indigenous groups that worry the project will harm fisheries, a primary subsistence resource for residents. Daily of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Continuing its efforts to promote renewable energy, the Biden administration announced what it says will be the largest community solar effort in U.S. history, enough to power 140,000 homes and businesses in 3 states. Vice President Kamala Harris announced the deal during a visit to the Q-Cells solar panel factory outside Atlanta. The South Korean company's corporate parent, Hanwha Solutions Corp., said in January it will invest $2.5 billion to expand its Dalton, Georgia plant and build another plant in nearby Cartersville. Q-Cells projects it will supply about 30% of total U.S. power solar panel demand by 2027, including making solar panel components usually manufactured outside the United States. A deal announced by Harris calls for Q-Cells and Virginia-based Summit Ridge Energy to deploy community solar projects capable of generating 1.2 gigawatts of electricity in Illinois, Maine, and Maryland. Community solar projects allow people to tap into solar power generated at a shared site rather than on individual rooftops, and are a way for renters and those without access to rooftop solar panels to receive the benefits of clean energy. Community solar results in an average of 10% in annual savings for customers. The new plan will require the manufacturing of 2.5 million solar panels at Q-Cells plant in Dalton, Georgia, the largest community solar order in American history. The solar project is made possible by tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act, the landmark climate and health law Congress approved last year. The huge order by Summit Ridge Energy was made possible by the investments that have been made to expand American manufacturing and increase demand for clean energy, Harris said. There is a nexus there. When we talk about the relationship between supply and demand, it is real. Harris touted the role of Georgia's two Democratic senators, Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, in approving the climate law and pushing for provisions to boost solar. Harris did not mention any political opponents, but White House officials contrasted Democratic efforts to promote clean energy with Republicans who unanimously oppose the climate law. The White House singled out Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican who represents Dalton. Greene voted against the climate law and wants to repeal parts of it. A conservative firebrand, Greene appeared at a rally in New York to protest the arrest of Trump, has sharply criticized the Inflation Reduction Act, especially a plan to hire new IRS employees. Thousands of those hired will be armed agents, Greene said, a claim the IRS has strongly disputed. Employees to be hired under the new law will not be auditors, and many will be replacing workers who are expected to quit or retire. Armed special agents make up a small sliver of the IRS workforce. A spokesperson for Greene did not respond to a request for comment. She has previously said she is excited to have jobs in her district from the Q-Cells plant. Yeah. All right. Let us ponder that as we go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, all that is violent and beautiful. John Wick is back and arguably better than ever. Clocking in at nearly 3 hours, John Wick Chapter 4 is the longest and most globe-trotting of the series thus far, with action taking place in Japan, France, Germany, and of course, John's familiar stomping grounds, New York. No time is wasted picking up where Chapter 3 left off. With the bounty on his head growing exponentially, our favorite assassin learns there is a way to defeat the organization that put the hit on him, the shadowy, sinister High Table. But as you can imagine, it's not going to be easy. Familiar faces here include Keanu Reeves as the title character, Ian McShane as the always-in-control hotel manager, and the recently deceased Lance Reddick as the faithful concierge. There are some new players, too, most notably Hong Kong kung fu luminary Donnie Yen as the blind assassin Kane, and Bill Skarsgård, a member of the High Table, who happens to be a Marquis, and like another famous Marquis, Desaad, seems to take pleasure in tormenting people. This latest chapter fleshes out John's backstory a bit more, but it never bogs down with detail. A wise decision because it's the fight scenes and body count for which fans show up, and they won't be disappointed here. Chapter 4 delivers its fight scenes showing incredible choreography, set design, and cinematography that make this one jaw-droppingly beautiful at times. And for a film in its genre, it also wrestles with some surprisingly deep themes, including mortality, how we're remembered, and indeed the fortune of being remembered by anyone at all. While those questions remain, it's clear that John Wick 4 is an action movie you won't soon forget. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities, such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute?
When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. For more than 150 years before 1776, the American colonists had grown used to little direct interference by Parliament in colonial affairs. This policy was known as salutary neglect. The term comes from a speech by Edmund Burke, given in the House of Commons in 1775. He said, "When I know that the colonies in general owe little or nothing to any care of ours, and that they are not squeezed into this happy form by the constraints of watchful and suspicious government, but that through a wise and salutary neglect, a generous nature has been suffered to take her own way to perfection. When I reflect upon these effects, when I see how profitable they have been to us, I feel all the pride of power sink, and all presumption in the wisdom of human contrivances melt and die away within me. My rigor relents. I pardon something to the spirit of liberty." However, the 7 Years' War of 1756 to 1763 forced the British to incur many debts. To make matters worse, Britain faced pressure to reduce taxes in Britain. Parliament therefore sought to increase taxes and its control over America, which led to discontent among the colonists. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1803. That was the day utopian socialist and women's rights activist Flora Tristan was born. She's also remembered as the grandmother of painter Paul Gauguin. Mario Vargas Llosa most recently popularized her life in the 2003 novel The Way to Paradise. Her family was aristocratic, but she grew up in poverty outside of Paris. The young Flora found work in an engraving shop and married the shop artisan, André Chazelle. Together they had 3 children. When the marriage became violent, she left him, though divorce was impossible. By some accounts, she became a maid for the wealthy and traveled Europe. It was through her travels that she became a socialist. She witnessed abject poverty and inequality in too many countries and was drawn to the work of the utopian socialists. Tristan campaigned for the right of divorce and wrote at length of worker struggles on the cusp of industrialization. Her novels, which confronted women's inequality and workers' rights, appeared in the late 1830s. She regularly visited feminist and socialist salons in Paris where ideas linking social transformation and women's rights were popular. Her most well-known work of nonfiction is The Workers' Union, which appeared in 1843. In it, Tristan argues that craft guilds could no longer adequately represent workers in an era of industrialization. She envisioned an international union of workers that organized regardless of skill level, a union that took on broader issues of social justice. Tristan also tied the advancement of women to the advancement of workers. She believed that discrimination against women only strengthened anti-worker forces. Workers and women had to take up each other's causes in order to win true justice. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 46 degrees Fahrenheit with rain showers. And it looks like we'll have rain showers for most of the day, and we'll have a highs near 60. Winds out of the east-northeast will be shifting out of the west-southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And we should be getting about a quarter inch of rain today. Partly cloudy overnight, lows in the mid-30s, winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then overcast in the morning tomorrow, highs in the low 60s, winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then about a quarter inch of rain coming in tomorrow night and raining through the rest of the weekend. Looks like pollen is still rated as none here in our little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 20 parts per million, and that daytime UV index has now ticked up into the high range to level 6. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.93 inches. Visibility is at 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 95%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 58 degrees and fair. Paris is 57 degrees and partly cloudy. Rome is 63 and sunny. Kyiv is 54 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 54 and clear. Hong Kong is 71 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 64 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 55 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Gentimus Saccharnice of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. More than 5,000 people have fled from eastern Myanmar and into Thailand in recent days as fighting between Myanmar's army and armed resistance groups has intensified in the border area. At least 5,428 civilians, including more than 800 children, crossed the border by Wednesday night from Myanmar's Mawadi district to seek refuge in Thailand's Tak province, public broadcaster Thai PBS reported, citing an unidentified security official. It said they fled as ethnic rebels from the Karen minority allied with guerrillas of the pro-democracy People's Defense Force attacked two Myanmar government outposts near the border. The Army's regular soldiers are assisted by members of the Border Guard Force, composed of militias of ethnic minority groups allied to the military government. Myanmar's ethnic minorities have been fighting for greater autonomy for decades, but armed conflict in the country escalated sharply after Myanmar's army ousted the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi in February of 2021. Widespread opposition to the takeover shifted to armed resistance in many parts of the country as pro-democracy forces joined hands with several armed ethnic minority groups. Clashes and airstrikes along the border have triggered a sporadic exodus of Myanmar villagers into Thailand's border provinces, where they are often offered temporary refuge before being sent back home. India has also seen streams of refugees from western Myanmar. An official from the Thai border district of Mae Sot told the AP that clashes on Myanmar's side of the border were continuing and gunfire could be heard from the Thai side yesterday, Thursday. The official, who asked not to be identified because he is not authorized to release information, estimated the number of refugees currently under the care of Thai authorities to be at least 5,000 people.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Sergeant Nedalovic and Derek Gatopoulos of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Greece has pledged military assistance to Ukraine for as long as it takes, but officials caution that the country needs to keep much of its Russian-made weaponry for its own defensive needs. Ukrainian Defense Minister Reznikov visited Athens yesterday, Thursday, as part of regular meetings with officials from NATO countries. He was promised more artillery and small arms ammunition shipments, access to Greek hospitals for wounded military personnel, and additional Soviet-era BMP infantry fighting vehicles. Greece will provide every support to Ukraine at this very important, crucial stage of the war, the Greek defense minister said during a joint appearance with Reznikov. We will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. That's a very clear position that we have taken from the outset. Military officials said Greece has also provided trainers for Ukraine's special forces and tank operators as a contribution to the massive military assistance effort led by the U.S. and its allies. Russia, which had traditionally close ties with Greece before the war in Ukraine, for decades had been a supplier of arms to the NATO member, including the S-300 air defense missile system. Moscow has singled out Athens for criticism over its support of Ukraine. The Greek Prime Minister, speaking in Parliament on the eve of Reznikov's visit, said Greece would not provide any military assistance that could compromise its own defense, and stressed that major arms procurement plans remained unchanged, despite a recent thaw in tension with neighbor and fellow NATO member Turkey. German-made Leopard tanks, the minister said, could not be provided. The rumors are running rampant that we will send fighter jets and S-300s and this and that. For goodness sake, he told lawmakers, we give what we can give, but nothing that would weaken in the slightest our own defense capabilities given our own national security challenges. Reznikov said Greece had offered assistance to Ukraine to better integrate its navy with NATO. After the victory of Ukraine in this war, together with our partners, we will continue to develop our defense capability, Reznikov said. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, even during the weekend. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.